But we've only just begun. Huh? That's bringing us to the last part. We've only just begun. This is a crisis, and again, never waste a good crisis, but it will also impact us, hopefully positively in the end, a kind of a catharsis, but also negatively. And yeah, we need to see what this will bring. At the moment, we're still at maybe in the middle or the aftermath of the first big crisis, and likely to get into a depression or a recession in the coming period, which will probably go into 2021 and probably even further for some areas. So this is a role where we have something to do now in the short term and something to do in the mid and the long term. And this is also something that we've asked our you basically, what you think about it. So could you help us in understanding the answers of the respondents, but also what the conclusions would be at this moment?
I think as people start to realize that crises like COVID will be part of the game. This is something which is not, let's hope it's over and we can continue. You see a lot of response that people see we have to have a certain resilience. This will happen more often. And also we asked at the end of a lot of the interviews, like, what do you want, as the audience, what do you want to get out of this questionnaire and out of this webinar? And some people said we also hope to get that the more positive elements will bring brought to the table. Currently the whole news and everything, if you think about framing, is all quite negative, but we see a lot of good things also out of this crisis. And of course it's very harsh and it's very difficult, but we believe that you see back in these results that almost a large majority, 84%, really believes that it helps to accelerate innovation. So that we were postponing a lot of energy transition and in healthcare, we need to do something, and they really hope that this will be the impulse for the changes which are required, both in the company as well in societal. And also they will believe that startups, and especially the way of how startups work, will be very important to recover. We will come back to it in a couple of slides, but that the way we learn from startups, how they do, that this is also a way to get out of these crises, or at least to learn how to mitigate crises, because we will have them more in the future is the current expectation. And I think this corresponds with these scores on the poll on responsibility of taking care of these startups, because it's also seen that these startups are also a kind of medicine to towards this crisis.
And then it becomes more personal. What about your job in corporate venturing as a corporate venturist? Is it becoming more important due to the COVID-19 crisis, also knowing about innovation and technical acceleration probably due to this crisis? So you can, again, agree, disagree, or take the neutral stance in neither agree nor disagree. And I know now that I can talk a bit, because you need a bit of time to answer the questions. I see two things, and we discussed it before this webinar, where startups not only have very sexy and nifty innovations that could be useful for corporates and for the societal changes that we see. We also talked about the working methods of corporate venturing. We saw that startups have a way of working which is, let's say, we always talk about the speedboats and the big tankers. No, the startups are the speedboats, and the corporates are the big tankers. This is in the way they bring innovation to the market, but it's also how they do the innovation. We talked about the example of a LED technology company, which said all my engineers are now on the bench because nobody's buying my LED technology at the moment. So I will use them for breathing apparatus technology. So these 4 engineers, because it's a startup, not more, they all work now on breathing apparatus instead of on LED lighting. And this is something. And this is, of course, a startup which is not part of corporate venturing, but I can very well imagine that there are a lot of startups that show a corporate, especially in these times, how to really change tech very quickly in a clock time which is really unimaginable for a corporate. Have you seen that? Probably not from the survey, but is this something that
In
resiliates?
interviews, we had some. I can't quote, as we promised to keep this completely neutral, but we have also seen some examples of corporates, even internally. We have seen a lot of reallocation of resources internally, but also even between companies. You can imagine the automotive industry. There are a lot of people who are sitting on the bench, and also that we have seen some companies who gave examples that they offer their people that they could work for other companies, for example, indeed on these healthcare solutions, which are very needed at this moment for dealing with the COVID crisis. So they don't, not all, some of them are in the news, but there are also some others we don't see. And we see also that companies are starting to incorporate this startup ways of working, that people not only get free time to work on new ideas, but also if you are interested to work on another part of your corporation, that you are allowed to do that. And some companies just started that before the COVID crisis, but they make a lot of use now during it, and they were much more able to quickly reallocate, also proactively, some of their employees, which was very appreciated.
The corporates, not only the startups.
So it's starting, and we start to learn. I must say that it, especially in those companies who already have a long track record in corporate venturing, who are more proactive than the ones who are having a shorter track record.
In the meantime, is corporate venturing becoming more important due to COVID-19? And this is, of course, very comforting, but also very important and confirming what we believe in, but it's also something that needs to be believed and also thought by you and need to be convinced of. If we look at a lot of people, a real majority agree that corporate venturing is becoming more important, and for the rest nobody disagrees. Maybe we have the wrong audience, but I think it really shows that we believe in corporate venturing, and in the best or in the worst case we have a neutral stance, but we see a very large majority, very small print, but over 80% is agreeing to this statement.
And as we saw also, we have on the next slide, you could see that we have also asked, is it seen as an essential instrument in your organization, and are your company investing more? That's a little bit less yet, but you can look at this slide as, this is not above 50%. But on the other hand, we saw the same what we saw in the poll, that people believe that nobody gave the indication that it become less important. So at least a lot of people were indicating it will stay the same, but there were also companies who already where corporate venturing has an established position in it. And of course those people will say, yes, it stays, because we already are on the table of management. But we saw, especially with the companies who has a shorter track record, say 3 to 5 years, or just started with corporate venturing, that even this crisis helped them to reconfirm their position in the company and even put it higher on the agenda. Because they already had indicated by corporate strategy that they had to speed up the whole digitalization. And now you see it happening, that digitalization really needs to increase, and that you need different way of working. So for some of the people say, yes, we get now some confirmation. It's not so nice one because of the whole COVID crisis, but that we are important and that we are an essential instrument. And if I compare it also when we were writing the book in 2015, and if I compare it to now, then corporate venturing was only by a few. It was seen as an essential instrument, and seeing that almost 40% is indicating that it is an essential instrument, that I think is a very promising outcome. And of course, it becomes more aware. That's a relative, low percentage, but it's also by the fact that we ask about it, because a lot of top management is aware of the situation, that you need this different way of working to safeguard your future. So it's not so much that people are not aware of it yet, but some of them have a longer way to go than others. But there we see also something is moving. So I think that's a positive thing. We are seen like legal and HRM are always seen as an essential function of a company. And I'm very glad that corporate venturing finally is also seen as one of the core capabilities you need within your organization. And that can be this very negative and of course situation with COVID. This is some positive impact we have to safeguard.
And I can imagine that actually when time goes by and companies are able to really pursue some of these innovations and accelerate some of these innovations, that the awareness would also increase at a later point in time.
So this is the time to take the responsibility
Absolutely.
and act.
Absolutely, and it's also a time where you really can, if you go, for example, to the next slide, it's a lot about good stuff. So we promised also people not only talk about all the negative things and decrease it. Of course, it is a lot of negative things, less of resources. But this is also the time where you can really prove to there's corporate venturing that you own this position at the table. Because you have also a lot of good stuff. You see that companies, especially the companies who have some more experience in corporate venturing, they show that they can be very fast reallocation of resources. The example you gave just for the startup, where we see that also happening in some of the corporates. It was amazing to see how quick certain factories are still up and running. Of course, perhaps not at 100%, but a lot are talking about 70, 80%, where they really had everything up and running, reallocation between portfolios. I also worked for many, many years in large organizations. Now, really trying to reallocate resources was a hell of a job. And I was surprised of all the examples we got of where people really were allocating resources and actively doing that. The other good thing is also that we said as a sixth wave of corporate venturing is co-creating of ecosystems. And that's what you see happening now. You see now all kinds of things in news. What has been in the news is DSM, together with Auping and with Panton, who also combined it with the face masks. What you see now is that a lot of co-creation is happening, but the seeds were planted by corporate venturing. And it was not strange that DSM and Auping are working together, because they have learned to work with each other already because of startups, because of corporate venturing. So suddenly you are able to prove what your added value is, because corporate venturing is building, what Vareska is also saying, building these networks, which become very essential now, because you need to have new connections. So I think because of all the changes you have, you can prove what your added value is, and a faster dissemination of information and knowledge, also between startups, but also within the companies, and also of course, a lot of people saying what we can't do at this moment, but I think it's very important by corporate venturing to show to your management what you can do at this moment, and not only be in this kind of negative. If you can't predict the future, and I think that's very much the case at this moment, then co-create your future. And I think that's where corporate venturing really can add value. And I really would like to challenge you as an audience to really take this chance, because this is the time where you can prove what the added value is for your company. And that, then you see, I think, the last more visualization. If you look at the next slides, this is you talk about the boats. We have used rockets here for it, but I think the way of working, the small rockets, the startups, but also corporate venturing, I think this is the way to really get out of this crisis. And corporate venturing can give the required skills, but also the resources to do so. So we would like to challenge you, and also see, hopefully, when we continue with this research, that we see that, we hope that you also take the responsibilities, because you can co-create as corporates the networks, the ecosystems, build certain capabilities, get in contact with startups. And as was indicated already out of the survey, the belief is really that the startups and the way of working, because it's a disruption not only of the future, it's a disruption of the core. And corporate venturing is a way to deal with disruptions. And now not only your long term perhaps is at stake, no, your short term is at stake. And I think the ways of working which corporates have learned by corporate venturing, that is also now the way to save your core. So corporate venturing is not something for horizon 2 or 3, what we often thought of, but now you can also show what your added value is in the core, in horizon 1. So I think also some good stuff, not only the negative stuff, and we have to stop a lot of things. But if you want to survive, this is a way how you can prove and make a change happen.
So corporate venturing rockets attacking planet Corona.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you mentioned dealing with disruption, and that of course means also dealing with uncertainty. Yeah. And I think, say the last content words are for Vareska. So please.
Yeah, I think so. So to bring it back to how we started. So we started talking about uncertainty, and I think a lot of the things that we discussed already during this webinar also pointed to the fact that uncertainty is something that is not static. It's something that resolves over time, what I've tried to capture in this slide is that in the literature we also look at uncertainty as consisting of different types of uncertainty. So state uncertainty really begs the question, what's happening out there? And I think this is really the situation that most companies were facing right at the start of the crisis. Really, trying to understand what's going on, what's happening, and as a next step, only thinking about how is this going to impact me. And I think the next step, and that we haven't quite reached yet, but that we're slowly moving into, it has to do with the response options that we have, and really trying to understand what are the options that we have, and how do the different types of response also help me get out of the crisis. And I think when we started the study, we were really more in the beginning state of trying to understand what's happening out there and how will it impact me. I think right now companies will have a better understanding how uncertainty or how the crisis has impact I see. Oh, that's a question that is popping up.
So that's the question.
So let me finish this part. So, and I think the next stage really is to understand the response and how the response, actually helps getting out of the crisis. And that's also why, I think we've also jointly already come to the conclusion that perhaps it's a little bit too early to tell right now, and we hope to take you to take the participants also further along in this journey in understanding how corporate venturing can help also to deal with the crisis.
So in the meantime, we have a question, and apologies, we haven't studied how to do the questions. Luckily, they get online here in front of me. I don't know whether you see the question, but I will read it out loud just to be sure. Aside from digitization, which other reasons are being mentioned convincing top management to speed up corporate venturing activities? I see you nodding already.
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. It's a very relevant question, because just as we had the poll, I was also thinking that, of course, we're preaching to the choir now.
Yeah.
Right. So, what can we give the participants to take back to the company? I think, and Corina, maybe you want to add while I'm formulating my answer. So I think there are two things, right? So on the one hand, corporate venturing very concretely helps to invest in new opportunities, in solutions. Not just digitization, but different types of solutions that are perhaps a little bit further away from the core, but they may help dealing with the crisis as we move along. So in that sense, it really creates opportunities for innovation. At the same time, corporate venturing, and also by working with startups, I think also helps companies develop skills that are very important in determining the resilience that these companies have. So think about the example that the flexibility to reallocate resources or to change strategy to deal with different business models, etc. So those are skills that can be obtained from working with startups. Also, I think the network that it provides, also the network to other, not just startups, but also to other players in the ecosystem, I think also provides an important source for this resilience. Maybe Corina, you want to add?
Same as for me, four things. It can help in the content, which is digitization, so going to speed up certain capabilities you don't have. It's in the way of working, so new methodologies, as Vareska also was indicating, like we showed with the small rockets, that more iterative way of working and more flexible. It can help you in awareness to your management, because with a crisis you see what's the real necessity. And last but not least is the co-creation. So you start to be aware that not invented here syndrome hopefully starts to, we found out that that's not working, and that we can work with startups, and that we can work also big companies with big companies to really create something new. So it's not only on the content of digitization, but also on the awareness, the way of working, and on co-creation.
I think maybe to add one more to that is this idea of building options. So making, let's say, smaller commitments in creating options for the future, but also creating options while you're waiting for some of this uncertainty to dissolve. And if not for the current crisis, I'm certain that this will also help in future crises that, like the COVID-19, we do not see coming. We have no idea what it is, how it will impact us, but at least it will give us resilience in creating options to deal with it.
Okay, I hope this answered the question. I think we've given it an extensive look. I think it is important that it's a long-term play. And on one hand, yes, you have to have argumentation towards your management to explain the role and responsibility, and of course the continuation of the role of corporate venturing. But as you mentioned, corporate venturing has already been there for a lot of companies and is now in quite a mature phase. So you can show for some results. They can be financial, but they can also be more qualitative, like we have a stronger network, like you mentioned. If there is this open relation for the face masks, this was started in the embryo phase in the beginning through corporate venturing. I think it's also, on one hand, you need the arguments for the future, but you also have to show for the results and spread the word of the results that you have already gained. And I think already financial and non-financial results have been clearly already obtained by corporate venturing. So we also shouldn't be too modest about that, because I think the results will also help us in the argumentation towards management.
I think perhaps in a seventh wave, so the last time is in 2015, the sixth wave of corporate venturing is co-creating of ecosystems. I think what Francesca also is saying, that perhaps there's now a seventh wave. If you want to have resilience of your corporate, if you want to make your corporate sustainable, that's the role of corporate venturing. So I see almost a kind of seventh wave coming on now for corporate venturing.